Our New Testament reading is from Acts 9, 1 through 6. Meanwhile, Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any who belonged to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now as he was going along and approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The reply came, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do." This is the word of the Lord. Trying to answer the question of how Saul became Paul, there's two sorts of answers. One of them is really short and simple, and we infer things, we don't really have all the details. But the other is a long story. So this sermon is going to be a little different this morning because the story begins in chapter 9 and it doesn't end until chapter 13. I could preach a long time on all those chapters. Well, it begins with Saul, who was born in Tarsus, a Hebrew town. He was a Pharisee, and he was well educated. He sat at the feet of Gamaliel, who was a well-known scholar of Hebrew law in the Sanhedrin, who had the assemblies, who constituted some of the highest courts in the land. And he was very brilliant, and he was a wonderful speaker. But doggone it, he really hated those believers in Jesus, who at that point were called the Way. And it was only a little Jewish sect, little pockets of Jews within the Hebrew community. It had nothing to do with Gentiles, and they considered themselves good Jews, but they just believed in Jesus as the Messiah, Jesus resurrected, forgiveness of sins, eternal life, and they were finding new life in this belief. And it kind of really took off when one of the early believers named Stephen said some things, and the Jews got really mad and took him out and stoned him to death. And did so with the full approval of the powers that be. And there was this young man, this young Pharisee, standing there approving, and they laid their coats at his feet as they went about their deadly business. And Saul, see, we're so used to saying Paul, aren't we? Well, anyway, Saul started on this rampage of arresting these believers and punishing them and killing them. And people started scattering to other cities to escape. And word really got out about this guy Saul. And he heard about these believers in Damascus. So he got permission from the high priest to go and bring them back and punish them. And so here he was with a few of his entourage, I guess you'd say, and they're on the way to Damascus, when all of a sudden, boom, there's this lightning-like light that is so bright and fierce that it blinds Paul and he falls to the ground. And he hears a voice, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He says, "Well, who is this, Lord?" "Well, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. But go into the city, go on into Damascus, and you will be told what to do." Well, William Willimon, a really well-known preaching professor and practical theologian, He cited a quote by Flannery O'Connor, the famous author, who once said of Paul, "I reckon the Lord knew that the only way to make a Christian out of that one was to knock him off his horse." Never mind that he didn't have a real horse. But you know, we all sometimes need to get knocked off our horse, don't we? And God is at work in all of our lives. It's often not this dramatic, but it's real. And so we need to pay attention to God being at work in our life and calling us in new directions. Well, Saul goes to Damascus, and there he is in someone's home, and he can't see. And for 3 days he doesn't eat, he doesn't drink. And during this time, a believer named Ananias, he has a vision. And in this vision, God says to him, "I want you to go to Saul." And Ananias is a man, and he said, "Lord, you know this guy's been persecuting us." All right, I'm going to make this change now. I'm going to make it right now. We're going to do something about that. Oh, there it is. All right, that's okay. Excuse me about this, but that's got to change. We got to get a new one or something. Anyway, all right. So Ananias finally is convinced by the Lord to go. The Lord said, "Look, I have chosen this man as my instrument to go and tell the Gentiles and kings and Israel about me." So Ananias goes, and then he encounters Saul, and Saul's able to see again, and now isn't that symbolic? You know, here Saul is, his whole world's turned upside down. He's in this interim time of limbo. He can't go back, but he hasn't gone forward yet, and then being able to see again, he's like seeing for the first time, seeing a new world, seeing a world of belief, and he's a changed man. You know, you ever have one of those experiences where you lost your way and you can't see anymore, but you're not clear on what direction to go in, and then all of a sudden, there it is, and you're in a new world, and you've changed, and you can't go back. Well, Ananias baptizes Saul. Now, Saul goes and meets all the disciples in Damascus, and they're not trusting him one bit, but he starts preaching forcefully with his brilliant oratory skill. He starts telling the story of Jesus. And finally, he gains their trust, and then they send him back to Jerusalem. Well, they're not having it either. The believers there know what's happened. So finally, he meets this guy named Barnabas, a believer. They strike up a relationship, and I think it's through Barnabas that he really starts gaining the trust of the believers in Jerusalem. And there he is telling the story of Jesus, and they're really surprised, but they start taking him in. And he's not on his mission yet. He's not there yet. He's a newbie in belief. He's got a lot to learn. So the Jerusalem folks send him to Tarsus. And there he stays for a good long while. And then all of a sudden the story shifts to Peter. Now Peter goes to Joppa. And in Joppa, he encounters a woman named Tabitha who becomes ill and dies, but God, through him, performs a miracle, and she lives again, and many new believers are brought in to the way. Then the scene shifts again. Now this is chapter 10. The scene shifts to Caesarea, to the house of a man named Cornelius. Now, Cornelius is a Roman, and he's a centurion of the Italian cohort. He's a powerful man. Now, as a Gentile, he is a faithful man, and he prays, and he's a good man. And he has a vision, and in this vision,
Lord says, I want you to send for Peter and hear what he has to say. So he does. And here Peter's still in Joppa, and those men are coming. They're just about there, and Peter's up on the roof of the place where he was staying, and it was designed for people to be up there, and it's flat, and he's praying, and falls into a trance. And in this trance, he has a vision. This cloth comes down with four corners, and on this cloth are all kinds of animals, four-legged animals, reptiles, all kinds of animals, and they're unclean, and they're not supposed to be eaten. But God says, all right, kill and eat. And Peter says in the vision, no, I'm not supposed to. It's against my religion. And then it happens 3 times. 3 times this is acted out. And then afterward, Peter's really puzzling over the vision. Why does God want me to break my tradition? About that time, these men sent from Cornelius to find Peter. They knock on the door. And then Peter realizes it's not about the food. The vision wasn't about the animals. It was about people. It's okay to be with these people that I'm never supposed to be with. So he says, here I am, and they spend the night, and the next morning they go off to Caesarea. A bunch of people in the house gathered to hear what Peter has to say. They're all Gentiles. Here's what he says to them. You yourselves know that it is unlawful for a Jew to associate with or to visit a Gentile. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean. And likewise, neither should we. This story challenges all of us. Take a look at who we, in our own minds, don't want to be with. And we need to be reminded to not call anyone profane or unclean. So then Peter tells the story of Jesus. Many believe. The Holy Spirit comes upon them. Wow, it's amazing. These are Gentiles. Well, now, chapter 11. Back in Jerusalem, the believers heard what Peter did, and they got angry at him. Why is he doing this? And then he explained. He just went through the whole story. And so then they accepted that God wanted Gentiles to be believers too. So the stage is being set for Saul. Well, now we come back to Barnabas and Saul. Now, you know, the people, as I said, have been scattered, right, to different cities. So there's a bunch of believers in Damascus. And they send Barnabas and Saul to go and teach the believers there. And, well, at first they sent Barnabas. He had great success, and he got in his head, I need some help. So he goes to Tarsus and retrieves Saul. And they are teaching, and more believers are being added, and they stay there for a whole year. And it was in that place, Antioch, that the disciples were first called Christians. So then they send Saul on a mission trip to take some food to some people in Judea who are going to be suffering from a famine. So then, while Barnabas and Saul are on their mission, back in Jerusalem now, see, there's a lot going on here. I'm surprised there aren't a lot of good movies about this, to tell you the truth. King Herod, has James, the brother of John, killed by the sword. And the Jews like it. So he arrests Peter he's going to have him killed too. So there they are in the night. Peter is chained and guarded, but an angel comes and helps Peter escape miraculously. He goes right to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who's also called Mark. And so she's really excited. She's so excited to see him at the door, she forgets to open it and runs back and tells everybody else. Mary leaves him standing there waiting. They say, oh, go let him in. So they do, and they've been praying for him, believers. And so he tells them what happened. And then he goes to some place, probably in hiding, and to keep them from being in danger. But then some people from another town, very soon after that, they get so mad at Herod that they actually kill Herod. I don't think anybody wept very much. So then Barnabas and Saul return to Jerusalem, and they bring a new believer they have met John, who's called Mark, also named Mark. And then they return to Antioch. And while they are there, there is the Spirit's guidance for the people to commission Saul and Barnabas to bring the good news of the risen Lord to the Gentiles. And so off they go. And they go here, and they go there, and Paul starts this tradition where he'll when they enter a new little place, he'll go into the synagogue there and start telling the story of Jesus. So then the Jews are always getting mad at him, wanting to kill him, and he's always having to escape. Anyway, before long, they're in a place called Paphos. And they encounter a Jewish magician named Bar Jesus. And this man was, he wasn't a very nice man. He was with this Gentile, a proconsul, an important man, and he was trying to get the man not to believe what Saul and Barnabas wanted to tell him. And so Saul has some really nasty words for him. You son of the devil, you enemy of righteousness, full of all deceit and villainy, will you not stop making crooked the straight paths of the Lord? And in the end, the consul believed. So there he is. Paul is off and running into history. Well then, why? Here's the main deal. Why did the author of Acts sneak that name change into the story? Now you see, it was there in chapter 9. It is in chapter, not 9, but when they are going, all the author of Acts says is, Saul, also called Paul. And that's it. Now what we reason about that is this. Yes, Saul was a Jew. He was a Pharisee. And his father happened also to be a Roman citizen. And it was very common in those times to have a Latinized name. And if you had to live out in the Gentile world, to have a name that was maybe not your Jewish name. So it may be, for scholars' reason, that Paul or Saul kind of dusted off his Roman name and used it when he was on his missionary journeys in the Gentile world. Now, why would he do that? Here's the important point for us. Paul, as we could call him now. How did he do business? How did he extend his ministry? Well, did he try to make people feel guilty? Did he try to make people feel fearful? If you don't believe, something terrible is going to happen. No, he did not. When he went into new cities, new cultures, new religions, he tried to put himself in their place. And he tried to be very kind. And he tried to get a situation where people could, without guilt and fear, just be curious and listen to what he had to say. He treated them in loving, respectful ways. And so, with his oratorical skills, he would tell the story of Jesus, and people would respond and believe, and the Gentile population of the way began to grow. And all these little churches started being developed all around. And that has a great message for us. Let us remember that name shift as a kind of a sign that we too do not wall ourselves off from others. And when we go out into the world, let us put ourselves in the place of all different kinds of people. And let us not dwell on guilt and fear, but let us be kind. Let us relate. Let us enable people to listen to what we have to say. For we are the church. And our calling too, just like with Paul, is to go out and be the instrument of God and to tell the story of Jesus. And see who responds. Some will respond because people want that forgiveness. And they want that hope. And they want that relationship with God that can come through belief in the risen Lord. So let us be thankful for Paul. Let us be thankful for that whole story of Acts that gives us such a wonderful vision of how the church began to grow. And let us be thankful that God is still calling people out to go out into the world with the good news of the story